My name is Jeremiah, 37 years old, and I never thought my attempt to build family bridges would end like this. Standing outside my stepsister Natalie's wedding venue, a wedding I'd paid $45,000 for, watching a security guard hold up photos of my children, Lily and Noah, with "Do not admit" scrawled across their innocent faces. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd felt since losing my wife. I turned around, my children's hands in mine, and walked away. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family betray you after you've given everything to help them. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My family story isn't uncommon, but the pain feels uniquely mine. When I was 12, my parents divorced after years of escalating arguments and cold silences. Dad moved out, leaving me with Mom in our suburban home in Massachusetts. 2 years later, when I was 14, Dad announced he was remarrying. Veronica seemed nice enough at first, polite, well-dressed, always smiling. She had a daughter, Natalie, who was 6 years old when our parents married. From the beginning, integrating our families was challenging. Natalie, understandably, had a hard time adjusting. She was a child whose world had been upended, and suddenly she had a teenage stepbrother who represented another change she hadn't asked for. I tried to connect with her. I really did. I'd offer to play games, help with her homework, even attended her school events when Dad couldn't make it. But Natalie made it clear she saw me as competition, not family. "Mom likes you better than me," she accused once when she was around 8 years old. I was 16 at the time, focused on college applications and my part-time job at the local tech store. "That's not true," I told her. "Your mom loves you more than anything. Then why is she always saying I should be more like you?" Natalie shot back, tears in her eyes. I didn't know how to respond to that. I hadn't asked Veronica to compare us, and it made me uncomfortable to think she was doing so. As the years passed, I threw myself into academics. I was fortunate to receive a full scholarship to MIT, where I studied computer science and business. Those college years were intense, but rewarding. I made true friends for the first time, people who appreciated me for who I was, rather than seeing me as an inconvenience or competition. My roommate Marcus became my closest friend, the brother I never had by blood. When I'd visit home during breaks, the dynamic hadn't improved. Natalie, now a teenager, would barely acknowledge my presence. Veronica would make comments like, "See, Natalie? Jeremiah got a scholarship because he studies. Maybe you should follow his example." I'd cringe internally, knowing these comparisons only drove the wedge between us deeper. Dad tried to maintain peace, but rarely stood up to Veronica. "She's just trying to motivate her," he'd say when I mentioned how uncomfortable those comparisons made me feel. "Besides, you're a good influence." After graduating, I landed a job at a promising tech startup in Boston. At 25, I married Elizabeth, my college girlfriend who worked as a graphic designer. We were young, in love, and excited about building our future together. 2 years later, our daughter Lily was born, followed by our son Noah when Lily was 3. Life seemed perfect until it wasn't. When Noah was just 1 and Lily was 4, Elizabeth started experiencing severe headaches. What we thought was stress or maybe migraines turned out to be an aggressive brain tumor. Within 6 months of diagnosis, I lost the love of my life, leaving me a widower with 2 small children who didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. Those next few years were the hardest of my life. I juggled single parenthood with my increasingly demanding career. I'd started my own software company by then, developing security solutions for businesses. The company grew steadily, requiring more of my time just when my children needed me most. Rachel, Elizabeth's sister, became my lifeline. She moved to a nearby apartment and helped with childcare while I worked. Without her, I'm not sure how we would have survived those early years of grief. Throughout this period, my relationship with my stepfamily remained complicated. Veronica offered perfunctory condolences when Elizabeth died, but made little effort to help with the children. Natalie, by then in college, didn't even attend the funeral, claiming exams were too important to miss. 3 years after Elizabeth's death, My company was acquired by a larger tech corporation for a sum that meant financial security for my family. I was suddenly wealthy, though the achievement felt hollow without Elizabeth to share it with. I stayed on as an executive consultant, which gave me more flexibility to be present for Lily and Noah. That's when things with my stepfamily shifted. Suddenly, Veronica was calling more often. Dad started suggesting family gatherings, and Natalie, who had previously shown zero interest in being my sister, began referring to me as her successful brother to her friends. I wasn't naive. I understood the change had more to do with my bank account than any genuine desire for connection. Still, for my father's sake and because I wanted my children to have extended family, I cautiously re-engaged. Lily, now 6, and Noah, 3, deserved to know their grandfather, even if that meant dealing with Veronica and Natalie. When Natalie announced her engagement to Bradley Richardson, son of Harold Richardson who owned a successful chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast, I was genuinely happy for her. At 29, she seemed to have matured somewhat, and Bradley appeared to be a stabilizing influence, polite, well-educated, and from a family with strong values. Little did I know that this engagement would set in motion the events that would eventually force me to redraw all the boundaries in my life. The engagement announcement came during a family dinner at my father's house. Natalie was beaming as she showed off a diamond ring that caught the light from every angle. Bradley stood beside her, arm around her waist, looking proud and slightly nervous as he met the family. "We're thinking of a spring wedding," Natalie announced. "Something elegant and memorable." "Congratulations," I said sincerely, raising my glass in a toast. My children, now 9 and 6, clapped excitedly at the idea of a wedding. "Will there be a princess dress?" Lily asked Natalie. For a moment, Natalie's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, sweetie, the most beautiful one." As coffee and dessert were served, Natalie began outlining her wedding vision. A ceremony at the historic Rosewood estate, followed by a reception for 300 guests, a designer dress, exotic flowers flown in from South America, a 10-piece orchestra, and a honeymoon in the Maldives. "That sounds extensive," I commented, mentally calculating the astronomical cost of such an event. "Well, we only plan to get married once," Veronica said defensively. "Natalie deserves her dream wedding." I noticed Bradley shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "We're still working out the budget," he said diplomatically. "My parents have offered to help, but we want to be reasonable." A week later, my father called and asked to meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at a quiet restaurant near my office. "I need to ask you something, son," he began, looking uncomfortable. "You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." "What is it, Dad?" "It's about Natalie's wedding. Veronica and I. Well, we're not in a position to contribute much. My retirement fund took a hit with the market downturn, and we're still paying off the mortgage on the house." I waited, already sensing where this was headed. "Natalie has her heart set on this wedding, and Bradley's parents are covering half, but there's still a significant shortfall." He looked at me pleadingly. "I know you've done well for yourself. Would you consider helping out? For family?" My initial instinct was to refuse. Natalie had never treated me like family when it mattered. But the hopeful look in my father's eyes made me pause. He had always been caught in the middle, and despite his failings, I knew he loved me. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "About 20,000, he replied, not meeting my eyes. It was a substantial amount, but not one that would impact my financial security. After a moment's consideration, I agreed, telling myself it was for my father, not Natalie. "Thank you, son. This means the world to me, to all of us." What started as $20,000 quickly ballooned. 2 weeks after my conversation with Dad, Natalie called me directly for the first time in years. "Jeremiah, I need your advice," she began, her voice unusually warm. "The venue we wanted is booked on our date, but they have their premium ballroom available. It's just a bit more expensive." "How much more?" I asked warily. "Just 10,000 more. But it's so worth it. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a terrace overlooking the gardens." Against my better judgment, I agreed to cover the difference. I told myself it was an investment in family harmony. Next came the dress upgrade from a $5,000 design to a $15,000 couture gown. Then the guest list expanded from 300 to 400 people. The flowers became more exotic, the menu more elaborate, the honeymoon longer and more luxurious. Each time, Natalie approached me directly, always with a compelling reason why the upgrade was necessary, always with effusive gratitude that vanished the moment the check cleared. By the time the wedding was a month away, my contribution had reached $45,000, more than double the original amount. Throughout this process, I noticed a disturbing pattern. Whenever we were in family settings, Natalie was distant and dismissive toward me, but when she needed more money, she'd call or text with warmth and appreciation. Veronica, meanwhile, seemed to take my financial contribution for granted, as if it were simply my duty as the successful family member. During a dinner where both families met to discuss final arrangements, I found myself seated next to Harold Richardson, Bradley's father. He was an impressive man, self-made, straightforward, with a no-nonsense approach that I respected. "Jeremiah," he said, as we waited for our main courses, "Bradley tells me you founded Secure Tech Solutions. I've been following your company's progress, remarkable growth before the acquisition." I was surprised and pleased that he knew of my work. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. It was a labor of love. Call me Harold. And I'd love to pick your brain sometime about implementing better security systems across our hotel chain." We spent the next half hour engaged in substantive conversation about business strategy and technology integration. It was the most intellectually stimulating discussion I'd had at a family gathering in years. I couldn't help but notice Veronica watching us with thinly veiled jealousy. Later, I overheard her complaining to my father. He's supposed to be helping with Natalie's wedding, not networking with the Richardsons. As the wedding drew nearer, I began to notice my children being systematically excluded from the plans. Initially, Natalie had suggested that Lily could be a flower girl and Noah a ring-bearer, positions that had excited them tremendously. But those roles were quietly reassigned to Bradley's niece and nephew. "It just makes more sense to keep it in Bradley's family," Veronica explained dismissively when I brought it up. "Besides, your children are still processing their mother's death. A wedding might be too emotional for them." I was stunned by her insensitivity but chose not to argue for the sake of peace. The final straw came 3 days before the wedding, when Natalie called asking for an additional $5,000 to upgrade their honeymoon accommodations to an overwater villa. "Natalie, I've already contributed $45,000 to your wedding," I said firmly. "That's more than double what was initially discussed." "I know, and we're so grateful," she said quickly. "But this is the last thing, I promise. The villa has a glass floor where you can see the fish swimming beneath you. It's once in a lifetime." Against all my better judgment, I transferred the money, bringing my total contribution to $50,000. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, I felt increasingly unwelcome. I was seated at a table far from the main party, while even distant relatives of Veronica's had prime placement. My children were not invited to the rehearsal dinner at all, with the explanation that it's really just for the wedding party. As I was leaving, I overheard a conversation between Natalie and Veronica in the hallway outside the restrooms. They didn't see me around the corner. "Are you sure about this?" Natalie was asking. "He's paid for half the wedding." "Trust me," Veronica replied. "Those kids will cause a scene. They're too young to sit quietly through a ceremony. Besides, do you really want them in all your wedding photos? People will ask questions, and the whole day will become about Jeremiah's tragic backstory instead of your special moment." "You're right," Natalie sighed. "I'll tell the coordinator tomorrow morning. No children at the ceremony or reception." I stood frozen, unable to believe what I'd heard. Not only were they planning to exclude my children who had been fitted for formal attire and had practiced their best manners for weeks, but they were doing it behind my back, after I'd paid for half of the entire extravaganza. I drove home in a daze of hurt and anger, unsure of how to proceed, but certain that a line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. The morning of Natalie's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring day that belied the emotional storm brewing inside me. I had barely slept, torn between confronting Natalie about what I'd overheard and simply not attending the wedding at all. But in the end, I decided to go through with it for my father's sake, and because I didn't want to teach my children that it's okay to break commitments, even when you're angry. I helped Lily into her pale blue dress with its satin sash, her dark hair arranged in careful curls that she insisted looked just like a princess. Noah fidgeted as I adjusted his little bow tie, his blonde hair freshly trimmed the day before. "Will there be cake, Dad?" Noah asked for the 5th time that morning, his 6-year-old mind focused on the reception's desserts. "Yes, buddy, there will definitely be cake," I assured him, forcing a smile. "And you two need to remember your best manners today. This is an important day for Aunt Natalie." "I know, Daddy," Lily said solemnly. "I practiced sitting still for a whole 30 minutes yesterday. My heart ached at their innocence and earnestness. They had no idea they were about to be hurt by the very people who should have been embracing them as family." As we drove to the Rosewood estate, I received a text from my father. "We're seated in the 3rd row on the bride's side. Saved seats for you 3. That gave me some hope that perhaps Natalie and Veronica had reconsidered their cruel plan. Maybe they'd realized how hurtful it would be to exclude 2 children who had already experienced profound loss in their young lives. We arrived at the estate, a sprawling mansion with manicured grounds and a newly constructed ballroom extension that gleamed with windows in the late morning sunday. Valets took cars from arriving guests, and servers offered champagne and sparkling cider on silver trays near the entrance. "It looks like a castle," Lily whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Hand in hand with my children, I approached the grand entrance where a tuxedoed security guard checked names against a guest list. When our turn came, I gave my name with confidence. Jeremiah Hayes, and children. The guard scanned his list, then looked up with a frown. He stepped aside and murmured something to another security staff member who disappeared inside briefly. When he returned, he was carrying what looked like a folder. "Mr. Hayes, you're on the list, but..." The first guard opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside were printed photographs of Lily and Noah, school pictures from earlier that year. Across each photo, in bold red marker, were the words, "Do not admit." The world seemed to stop. I felt a rushing in my ears as blood pounded through my veins. "There must be some mistake," I managed to say, conscious of my children standing beside me, not yet understanding what was happening. "I'm sorry, sir," the guard said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Miss Natalie was very specific. You are welcome to attend, but your children are not permitted inside the venue." I looked down at Lily and Noah, who were beginning to sense something was wrong. Lily's lower lip trembled slightly as she pressed closer to my side. "Daddy, what's happening?" she asked in a small voice. In that moment, rage and heartbreak collided inside me. I pulled out my phone and tried calling my father and Veronica. No answer from either. I even tried Natalie's phone, though I knew she was likely busy with pre-ceremony preparations, straight to voicemail. As we stood there, uncertain what to do next, I noticed Harold and Diana Richardson approaching from inside. They had apparently witnessed the exchange and come to investigate. "Jeremiah, is everything all right?" Harold asked, his expression concerned. I didn't want to create a scene or ruin Natalie's day, despite her cruelty. "There seems to be some confusion about my children attending," I said carefully. Harold looked at the folder still in the guard's hands, and his expression darkened. "May I see that?" he asked the guard, his tone leaving no room for refusal. After examining the photos and the hateful message scrawled across them, Harold looked up at me, genuine shock in his eyes. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "This is unacceptable." But the damage was done. My children had seen their own photos marked like criminals, and Lily was now silently crying, while Noah looked confused and frightened. "I'm taking my children home," I said firmly. "Please give my father my regrets." "Of course," Harold said, his expression troubled. "This isn't right, Jeremiah." I turned around, took my children's hands, and walked back to the car with as much dignity as I could muster. Neither child spoke as I buckled them in. The drive home was filled with a silence so heavy it seemed to press against my chest. "Why didn't Aunt Natalie want us at her wedding?" Lily finally asked, her voice small and hurt. "Sometimes adults make bad decisions," I answered carefully. "But it has nothing to do with you two. You didn't do anything wrong. Did we do something bad? Noah persisted. No, buddy. Not at all. This is grown-up stuff that has nothing to do with you. My name is Jeremiah, 37 years old, and I never thought my attempt to build family bridges would end like this. Standing outside my stepsister, Natalie's wedding venue, a wedding I'd paid $45,000 for watching a security guard hold up photos of my children, Lily and Noah, with "do, not admit," scrawled across their innocent faces. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd felt since losing my wife. I turned around, my children's hands in mine, and walked away. After a couple of hours of forced normalcy, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. Jeremiah Hayes speaking. I answered professionally. Jeremiah, it's Harold Richardson. His voice was clipped and formal. I thought you should know that the wedding is off. I nearly dropped the phone. What? After you left, I spoke with Bradley about what happened. He had no idea about the security instructions regarding your children. When he found out, and when I informed him about the extent of your financial contribution to this event, he confronted Natalie. Rather than go straight home to an empty house filled with questions I couldn't adequately answer, I made a detour to their favorite ice cream shop, followed by an impromptu visit to the park. I tried to focus on creating a positive experience to overshadow the rejection, but my mind kept returning to those photos with their cruel message. I sat down heavily on a park bench, watching my children play on the swings, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Don't be, Harold replied firmly. You have nothing to apologize for. I'm calling because Natalie, Veronica, and your father are currently looking for you. They're on their way to your house too. What was the phrase? Fix this mess. I closed my eyes briefly. Thank you for letting me know. One more thing, Harold added, his voice turning cold. They're on their way to your house to beg. Do not answer the door. They don't deserve your forgiveness, not today. After hanging up, I sat watching my children for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. The wedding that I'd paid $50,000 for, that had caused weeks of stress and hurt feelings, was canceled. Part of me felt vindicated that Natalie's cruelty had been exposed, but another part felt deeply sad for everyone involved: my father, Bradley, even Natalie herself, whose special day was now ruined, largely due to her own actions. Eventually, I called my friend Marcus and briefly explained the situation. He immediately offered to take the kids for a sleepover with his children, giving me space to deal with the inevitable confrontation. Thanks, man, I said gratefully. I'll pick them up tomorrow morning. Take your time, Marcus assured me. And Jeremiah, remember you didn't cause this. You've been more than generous with people who didn't appreciate it. After dropping the children off at Marcus's house with overnight bags hastily packed from our emergency supplies in the car, I finally headed home, bracing myself for whatever came next. The house felt unusually quiet when I returned. I moved through the rooms, turning on lights as evening approached, feeling a strange mix of emotions: anger, hurt, relief that my children were safely away from the drama, and a growing sense of resolution that things needed to change. The first call came while I was making coffee in the kitchen. My father's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Veronica called. Then my father again. I silenced my phone and sat at the kitchen island, sipping my coffee and trying to organize my thoughts. When I finally checked my messages an hour later, there were 7 voicemails and 16 text messages. The voicemails progressed from my father's confused, "Where are you? The wedding's delayed and everyone's looking for you," to Veronica's accusatory, "How could you ruin Natalie's special day like this?" to Natalie herself, crying and incoherent about Bradley leaving her at the altar. The text messages told a similar story of escalating crisis, none acknowledging the actual cause: the deliberate exclusion of my children from an event I had largely financed. I was considering how to respond when the doorbell rang. I checked my security camera feed on my phone and saw what I had been dreading. Natalie still in her wedding dress, now somewhat disheveled. Bradley looking uncomfortable but present. My father with his hand on Natalie's shoulder. And Veronica standing slightly apart, arms crossed defensively. I made the decision not to answer. Not yet. I needed them to understand that actions have consequences, and they couldn't simply demand immediate forgiveness. The doorbell rang again, followed by knocking. Then my father's voice called through the door. "Jeremiah, please. We need to talk about what happened. It was a misunderstanding." I remained silent, moving to my living room window where I could see them on the porch, but they couldn't easily see me through the sheer curtains. "This is ridiculous," I heard Veronica say. "He's obviously not home. We're wasting our time." "He's home," Natalie insisted, her voice thick with tears. "His car is in the garage. I saw it." More knocking, more calling my name. I watched as the facade of family unity on my porch began to crack under the strain. "This is your fault." Natalie suddenly turned on Veronica, her voice rising. "It was your idea to ban the children." "Don't put this all on me," Veronica shot back. "You agreed it was necessary. You said yourself you didn't want those kids making a scene or taking attention away from you. I never would have gone through with it if I knew it would cost me Bradley." Natalie was sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup creating dark streaks down her face. My father tried to intervene. "Please, both of you. This isn't helping. We need to apologize to Jeremiah and figure out how to fix this." "Fix it?" Veronica scoffed. "Your son is the one who told Bradley's father about the money. He deliberately sabotaged Natalie's relationship." I felt a surge of anger. I hadn't said a word to Harold about my financial contribution. He must have found out another way. Bradley, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "That's not what happened, and you know it. My father asked the wedding coordinator about the final payments when he saw Jeremiah leaving. He was concerned something was wrong. That's when he found out who had been paying for everything. You could have kept that information to yourself." Natalie turned on him. "You didn't have to call off the wedding." "I called it off because I realized I don't know who you really are," Bradley replied, his voice steady despite the tension. "The woman I thought I was marrying wouldn't exclude innocent children from a family event, especially not children who have already lost their mother. And she certainly wouldn't do that to someone who generously paid for half of our wedding." $50,000, Natalie cried. "He paid $50,000. Do you know what that kind of money means to someone like him? Nothing. He probably spends that much on a weekend vacation." I winced at her words, the naked entitlement stunning even me who had witnessed it for years. "That's not the point, Natalie," my father said quietly. "It's not about the amount. It's about respect and appreciation. Jeremiah deserved better, and so did his children." They continued arguing on my porch for nearly an hour, their voices rising and falling, blame shifting from person to person. Eventually, even Natalie seemed to exhaust her capacity for drama. "He's not coming to the door," she finally said, defeat in her voice. "Let's go." "Where?" Veronica asked. "The venue is closed up. The guests have all gone home." "I don't know, Mother. Maybe back to the house where I can change out of this ridiculous dress that cost more than some people's cars." I watched them leave, feeling strangely hollow. There was no satisfaction in their distress, only a bone-deep weariness at the years of emotional manipulation and entitlement I had enabled through my desire to keep the peace. That night, alone in my house, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. I cried for the first time in years, not just for today's hurt, but for all the times I had compromised my own well-being, and now my children's emotional security in pursuit of approval from people incapable of giving it. In the morning, I checked my email to find a message from Bradley. "Jeremiah, I want to apologize personally for what happened yesterday. I had no idea about the financial arrangements for the wedding Natalie told me her parents were covering their portion. I also had no knowledge of the instructions regarding your children until my father brought it to my attention. I am deeply sorry for the hurt this has caused you and your family. While I care for Natalie, I cannot build a life with someone who would treat family this way. I hope you understand this isn't how my family conducts ourselves, and I wish you and your children all the best. Sincerely, Bradley." It was a gracious message from someone caught in a difficult situation. I appreciated his honesty and responded briefly, assuring him I held no ill feelings toward him or his family. Later that morning, Harold Richardson called again. "I hope you're doing all right today," he said when I answered. "As well as can be expected," I replied honestly. I meant what I said yesterday about implementing your security solutions across our hotel chain, Harold continued. Business aside, I've been impressed with how you've handled yourself throughout this situation. If you're open to it, I'd like to have lunch sometime. I've found myself in need of friends with integrity. His words were unexpected but welcome. I'd like that, Harold. Thank you. After picking up my children from Marcus's house and assuring them multiple times that none of yesterday's events were their fault, I began to realize that this wedding fiasco, painful as it was, might have been the catalyst I needed to finally establish healthy boundaries with my stepfamily. The week following the canceled wedding was intense. What had begun as a private family conflict quickly spiraled into something larger and more public than I could have anticipated. On Monday morning, my father showed up at my office unannounced, his face drawn with stress and lack of sleep. "We need to talk, son," he said as my assistant showed him into my private office. "This has gone on long enough." I gestured for him to sit down. "I agree, Dad. It has gone on far too long. Natalie is devastated. She's barely eating, barely sleeping. Her life is in shambles." He leaned forward, his expression pleading. "You need to talk to Bradley. Convince him this was all a misunderstanding." I stared at my father in disbelief. "A misunderstanding? Dad, she explicitly instructed security to turn away my children, your grandchildren, after I paid $50,000 for her wedding. How is that a misunderstanding?" She panicked, that's all. She was worried about the ceremony being perfect. So perfect that it couldn't include two well-behaved children who were excited to see their aunt get married. I shook my head. This isn't about the wedding anymore. This is about a pattern of behavior that's been going on for years, and I've enabled it by trying to keep the peace. My father's expression hardened. "So you're just going to abandon your sister when she needs you most?" "Stepsister," I corrected gently. "And I'm not abandoning her. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference." He left angry and disappointed, which hurt more than I wanted to admit. Later that day, I discovered that Veronica had taken the conflict to social media, posting a carefully crafted narrative that painted me as the villain who had deliberately sabotaged Natalie's wedding out of long-standing jealousy. Friends and extended family members who had only heard Veronica's version began calling and texting, some curious, others outraged on Natalie's behalf. Even business contacts mentioned seeing the posts, creating an uncomfortable situation I had never wanted. Meanwhile, Natalie's friends took it upon themselves to defend her honor by leaving negative reviews on my company's social media pages and sending messages that ranged from mildly critical to downright harassing. The situation became even more concerning when Lily came home from school in tears because a classmate whose mother was friends with Veronica had told her she wasn't wanted at her own aunt's wedding because she was a problem child. That evening, I sat down with both children and tried to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms. "Sometimes adults don't behave very well," I told them as we sat together on the couch. "What happened at the wedding wasn't about you. It was about grown-ups making poor choices." "But why didn't Aunt Natalie want us there?" Lily persisted, her 9-year-old mind trying to make sense of the rejection. "Aunt Natalie was very focused on having a perfect day her way," I explained carefully. "But that doesn't make her choice okay. It was wrong to exclude you, and many people, including Bradley and his parents, agreed it was wrong." Noah looked up at me with serious eyes. "Is that why they didn't get married? Because of us?" "No, buddy," I said firmly, pulling him close. "They didn't get married because Bradley realized that Natalie wasn't being kind or considerate to her family. That had nothing to do with you, and everything to do with Aunt Natalie's choices." The conversation helped, but I could see that both children were still processing the hurt. After consulting with Rachel, I arranged for them to meet with a family therapist who specialized in helping children deal with complex emotions and family dynamics. Dr. Jennifer Morris was warm and engaging, quickly establishing rapport with both Lily and Noah. After their first session, she asked to speak with me privately. "Your children are remarkably resilient," she told me, "but they're carrying a lot of confusion about their place in the extended family. Lily in particular seems to have internalized some messages about being too much or in the way." Her words broke my heart. "What can I do to help them?" Continue being the consistent, loving presence you clearly are, Dr. Morris advised. But also consider how much contact with your stepmother and stepsister is healthy right now. Children are perceptive, they know, when someone doesn't truly welcome them. Her advice confirmed what I had already been thinking. It was time to be more selective about family interactions, prioritizing my children's emotional well-being over maintaining appearances. The situation escalated further when I received a letter from the wedding venue demanding payment for cancellation fees. According to their contract, the remaining balance plus a substantial penalty was due regardless of whether the event took place. I forwarded the letter to my attorney, who advised me that since I had not signed any contracts with the venue, those had been executed by Natalie and Bradley, I had no legal obligation to cover these costs. He also suggested documenting all my previous contributions, in case the matter progressed further. Given the circumstances, Mark advised, I'd recommend sending a formal letter outlining the payments you've already made and making it clear you won't be covering any additional costs related to the canceled event. I authorized him to draft and send the letter, which he copied to Natalie, my father, and the venue management. This legal response triggered another confrontation with my father, who called that evening, anger evident in his voice. How could you involve lawyers in a family matter? He demanded. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Natalie? Dad, I said, trying to remain calm. I've already contributed $50,000 to a wedding that didn't happen because of Natalie and Veronica's choices. I'm not legally responsible for cancellation fees, and I won't be manipulated into paying them. This isn't about the money for you, he accused. This is about punishing Natalie. No, it's about consequences, I corrected. Actions have consequences. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply not shielding Natalie from the natural results of her decisions. There was a long pause before my father spoke again, his voice lower and more controlled. I need to tell you something, Jeremiah. Something I'm not proud of. My stomach tightened with apprehension. I knew about the plan to exclude your children, he admitted. Veronica and Natalie discussed it with me the week before the wedding. I didn't stop them. I thought you'd never find out that you'd drop the kids off with Rachel for the day and attend alone. His words hit me like a physical blow. You knew? And you said nothing? I was trying to keep the peace, he said, echoing the very phrase I had used to justify my own enabling behavior over the years. I didn't want to upset Natalie before her wedding. So you were willing to hurt your grandchildren instead? The pain in my voice was audible. I didn't think of it that way at the time, he said quietly. I see now how wrong I was. After a long, painful conversation, my father delivered what felt like an ultimatum. Jeremiah, I know mistakes were made on all sides, but family is family. If you can't find it in your heart to forgive Natalie and move forward, I don't know how we can continue as we were. Maybe we can't, Dad, I replied softly. Maybe we shouldn't. The call ended with no resolution, leaving me with the heavy realization that establishing healthy boundaries might mean losing relationships I had spent years trying to preserve. In the midst of this family crisis, I received unexpected support from Bradley's parents. Diana Richardson sent a beautiful arrangement of flowers, with a note expressing her admiration for how I was handling a difficult situation with dignity. Harold called to check in and invited me to join him for a round of golf, during which he shared wisdom from his own experiences with challenging family dynamics. Even more surprising was the number of extended family members who reached out privately to express support after hearing the full story. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, whom I hadn't seen in years, called to say she'd always been concerned about the dynamic with Veronica and Natalie. Your mother would be proud of you for protecting your children, she told me, bringing tears to my eyes. She always worried that Richard, your father, was too willing to overlook bad behavior for the sake of harmony. Just as things seemed to be settling into an uneasy detente, Natalie showed up at my house unannounced on a Saturday afternoon when the children were home. I opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. Natalie, now isn't a good time, I said firmly. Please, Jeremiah, she begged, her face showing signs of the emotional turmoil she'd been experiencing. I need to talk to you. Bradley won't return my calls. The venue is threatening to sue me. My friends are starting to ask questions I can't answer. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said sincerely. But my children are home, and after what happened, I don't think it's appropriate for you to be here. Uncle Jerry? Noah's voice came from behind me. Who's at the door? Before I could answer, Natalie called out, Noah, it's Aunt Natalie. Can you tell your daddy to let me in? I need to talk to him. I turned to see both my children standing in the hallway, eyes wide. Lily took an instinctive step backward, the hurt from the wedding day still fresh. That's not okay, Natalie, I said, my voice low and controlled. Don't try to use my children to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating anyone, she cried, her voice rising. I just want to explain. I want to apologize. Noah began to cry, confused and upset by the tension. Lily wrapped a protective arm around her brother and led him back toward the living room. You need to leave, I told Natalie firmly. If you want to apologize, you can write a letter or call me when the children aren't present. But right now, you're causing more harm. You've turned everyone against me, she accused, tears streaming down her face. My life is ruined, and you won't even give me 5 minutes. I closed the door, my heart pounding. Through the window, I watched as Natalie eventually returned to her car and drove away. The encounter left me shaken, but more certain than ever that I needed to make significant changes to protect my family. That evening, after the children were in bed, I sat down with a notepad and began mapping out a plan. It was becoming clear that temporary distance from my stepfamily might be necessary for everyone's well-being, especially my children's. The confrontation with Natalie at my front door proved to be a catalyst for change. The next morning, I called Dr. Morris and scheduled an emergency consultation to discuss how the incident might have affected Lily and Noah. Children are remarkably resilient, she reminded me during our meeting, but they're also deeply sensitive to conflict, especially when it involves family members. The scene at your door likely reinforced their feelings of rejection and confusion. What should I do? I asked, feeling the weight of responsibility for their emotional well-being. Have you considered creating some physical distance temporarily? She suggested. Sometimes a change of environment can help everyone reset and gain perspective. Her words echoed thoughts I'd already been having. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Harold Richardson. Jeremiah, I hope I'm not overstepping, he began, but I've been thinking about your situation. Our hotel group is expanding our digital security infrastructure across all properties, and we need someone who understands both the technical and customer service aspects to oversee implementation. It would be a 3-month consulting project, based at our headquarters in Chicago. Would that be of interest to you? The timing seemed almost providential. That's actually something I'd like to explore, Harold. My current consulting agreements are flexible, and a change of scene might be good for my family right now. Excellent, Harold replied, sounding pleased. I'll have my team send over the details. And Jeremiah? Our corporate housing includes family-friendly apartments with excellent security, just in case that's a consideration. I thanked him, appreciating his tactful understanding of my situation, without needing to explicitly discuss it. When I broached the idea of a temporary move with Lily and Noah, their reactions were mixed. Noah was excited about the adventure of living in a new city, while Lily had more reservations. What about school? And what about Aunt Rachel? She asked anxiously. Your school has agreed to let you do distance learning for a term, I explained. And Aunt Rachel thinks it's a good idea for us to have some time away. She might even come visit us in Chicago. Will Grandpa be sad? Noah asked, his young face serious. The question pierced my heart. Despite everything, they still cared about their grandfather. Grandpa will miss us, I said honestly. But sometimes families need a little space to figure things out. This isn't forever. As preparations for our temporary relocation progressed, I focused on making the transition as smooth and positive as possible for the children. We researched fun activities in Chicago, found a family-friendly apartment in a secure building near a park, and arranged for their favorite toys and books to be shipped ahead. The day before we were scheduled to leave, my father showed up at the house unannounced. You're running away, he accused as soon as I opened the door. Taking my grandchildren across the country without even discussing it with me. I'm not running away, Dad, I replied calmly. I'm accepting a temporary consulting position that happens to come with the benefit of giving us all some space to process what's happened. This is Veronica and Natalie's home too, he argued. You can't expect them to just disappear from our lives because of one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I corrected gently. It was the culmination of years of disrespect and entitlement. And I don't expect them to disappear. I expect them to take responsibility for their actions and demonstrate genuine change before they have access to my children again. My father's expression softened slightly. I miss them, Jeremiah. And I miss you. I miss the father I thought I had, I admitted. The one I believed would always protect his grandchildren, even if it meant standing up to his wife and stepdaughter. We talked for nearly 2 hours, diving deeper into family dynamics than we ever had before. My father revealed his own insecurities about his second marriage, his fear of ending up alone if he challenged Veronica too directly, and his guilt about not being more present during my childhood. I've been trying to make up for failing your mother by keeping Veronica happy, he confessed. But in doing so, I've failed you and your children. I see that now. Though the conversation was painful, it felt like the first honest exchange we'd had in years. We didn't resolve everything, but we reached a fragile understanding. This time apart would be used for reflection and growth on all sides, not simply as punishment. As he was leaving, my father hugged me tightly. Take care of those kids, he said, his voice rough with emotion, and take care of yourself. You're a better father than I ever was. I learned some good things from you too, Dad, I assured him, meaning it despite everything. On our last day in town, as I was finalizing packing arrangements, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Bradley standing on my porch alone. Bradley, I said, surprised. I didn't expect to see you. I hope it's okay that I stopped by, he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. I wanted to talk to you before you left town. Marcus mentioned you were moving temporarily. I invited him in, curious about what had brought him to my door. I wanted you to know that Natalie and I are officially done, he said once we were seated in the living room. I tried to work through what happened, to understand her perspective, but ultimately I realized I couldn't trust the foundation of our relationship. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. That's not an easy decision to make. The hardest I've ever made, he admitted. But the right one. And there's something else. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I had access to one of our joint accounts where some of the wedding funds were deposited. This is $10,000, a partial refund of your contribution. I wish it could be more. I was stunned by the gesture. Bradley, you don't have to do this. I do, he insisted. What happened wasn't right. My parents raised me to believe that character matters above all else, and I want to do what I can to make this situation a little less wrong. After Bradley left, I sat holding the envelope, reflecting on the unexpected allies this painful situation had revealed. People of integrity had shown themselves through their actions, not just their words. The first week in Chicago was a whirlwind of settling in, getting the children comfortable with their new temporary home, and establishing routines. The corporate apartment Harold had arranged was spacious and welcoming, with a view of the city that fascinated Noah and a small balcony garden that Lily immediately claimed as her reading spot. My work with the Richardson Hotel Group was challenging in the best way, utilizing my technical expertise while introducing me to a new industry. Harold proved to be not just a fair employer, but a valuable mentor, sharing business wisdom accumulated over decades of building his company from a single hotel to an international chain. As we adjusted to our new temporary life, I noticed positive changes in the children. Away from the tension and drama of our family situation, they seemed lighter, more playful. Noah's occasional nightmares decreased, and Lily's tendency to people-please, a concerning pattern I'd noticed developing, began to subside as she gained confidence in her new environment. 2 weeks into our stay, I received a call from Rachel with news from home. Natalie's been telling people you kidnapped the children to punish her, she reported, anger evident in her voice. She's playing the victim to anyone who'll listen. I sighed, disappointed but not surprised. Is it causing problems for you? I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Don't worry about me, Rachel assured me. Most people who know the whole story aren't buying her version. I just thought you should be aware. Rather than engage with Natalie's accusations, I focused on building our life in Chicago. We discovered favorite parks, museums, and pizza places. The children began making friends with other kids in the building. I established connections with colleagues who quickly became friends. 1 month into our stay, I received an unexpected email from Veronica. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." The message was brief, but contained something I'd never received from my stepmother before. A genuine apology. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she wrote. "My behavior at Natalie's wedding, and in the years leading up to it, was inexcusable. I prioritized appearances over people, and I hurt innocent children in the process. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I've caused. I've started seeing a therapist to understand why I've acted this way and how to do better." I read the email several times, searching for the manipulative undertones I'd come to expect from Veronica, but it seemed, surprisingly, sincere. I crafted a careful response, acknowledging her apology without making promises about the future. "I appreciate your honesty," I wrote back. "This has been a painful time for everyone involved, especially Lily and Noah. I'm glad you're seeking help to understand your actions. As for the future, I think we all need time and space. Any reconciliation will need to happen slowly, with clear boundaries and respect for the children's emotional well-being." As our second month in Chicago progressed, I found myself developing new friendships that felt healthier and more authentic than many of my previous relationships. Diana Richardson introduced me to a community volunteer group that worked with underprivileged children, which gave me perspective on my own family challenges. Through the volunteer program, I met Sophie, a pediatric nurse, whose calm wisdom and genuine kindness toward both my children and me was refreshing. What began as casual conversation during volunteer events gradually evolved into coffee meetings and eventually dinner dates when Rachel would visit and stay with the children. Lily and Noah took to Sophie immediately, appreciating her straightforward manner and the way she spoke to them with respect rather than condescension. She had a gift for listening to their concerns without judgment, a quality I increasingly valued. As our temporary relocation neared its end, Harold offered to extend my contract for another 3 months. The project was going well, and the children had adjusted beautifully to their Chicago life. After careful consideration and conversations with Lily and Noah, we decided to stay through the summer, giving us all more time to heal and grow before potentially returning to the dynamics of home. The distance and time apart had provided clarity I hadn't expected. I realized how much energy I had spent over the years trying to win approval from people who were incapable of giving it freely. That energy could now be directed toward building a life centered on genuine connections and mutual respect. A year after Natalie's disastrous wedding day, we returned home with a new perspective and stronger boundaries. The painful experience had ultimately led to authentic relationships and a deeper understanding of what family truly means. Our return home after nearly 6 months in Chicago felt like stepping into a familiar room where all the furniture had been subtly rearranged. Everything looked the same on the surface, but the underlying dynamics had shifted significantly. I met with my father at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes, for our first in-person conversation since our departure. The months apart had aged him visibly. New lines creased his face, and his hair seemed grayer than I remembered. "The house has been too quiet without you and the kids," he admitted after we'd exchanged somewhat awkward greetings. "It's good to see you, Dad," I said sincerely. "How have you been?" Over the next 2 hours, my father opened up more honestly than he had in years. He told me about joining a support group for men struggling with family conflicts, about the couples counseling he and Veronica had begun, and about his attempts to establish healthier boundaries with Natalie. "I've enabled her sense of entitlement her entire life," he acknowledged, staring into his coffee cup. "It wasn't doing her any favors, but it was easier than dealing with the tantrums and the guilt. I see that now." "What about Veronica?" I asked cautiously. "It's been difficult," he admitted. "She's trying, in her way. The therapist has helped her recognize patterns from her own upbringing that she's been repeating with Natalie. But change is hard at our age." I nodded, appreciating his honesty. "And Natalie? Have you been in contact with her?" She hit rock bottom after you left, my father explained. Bradley, returning that money to you, was the final straw. She'd been telling everyone he was begging for her back, that the wedding was just postponed. When she found out he'd given you a refund, she couldn't maintain the fiction anymore. That must have been difficult for her, I said, finding genuine empathy despite everything that had happened. It was, he agreed. But sometimes we need to hit bottom before we can start climbing back up. She lost her job, moved back home for a while. It wasn't pretty. But about 3 months ago, something changed. She enrolled in therapy on her own, not because we pushed her to, but because she wanted to. She's been working part-time at a local animal shelter. It's the first time in her life she's stuck with something challenging without expectation of reward. I was surprised by this development. The Natalie I knew had always taken the easiest path, expecting others to smooth her way. That's good to hear, I said carefully. She'd like to apologize to you and the children, my father ventured. When you're ready, no pressure. I appreciated his acknowledgement that we would need time. I'll think about it. But Dad, I need you to understand something important. Any relationship with Natalie moving forward will be on my terms, with clear boundaries to protect my children. They come first always. I understand, he said solemnly. And for what it's worth, I respect that. It took me too long to realize that my first responsibility should have been to protect you, not to keep Veronica happy at all costs. In the weeks that followed, we established a new routine. My father would visit once a week, spending time with Lily and Noah without Veronica or Natalie present. These visits were initially somewhat strained, but gradually became more comfortable as the children saw their grandfather making consistent effort. 3 months after our return, I agreed to a carefully controlled meeting with Natalie. We met at a park, neutral territory, where the children could play within sight, but out of earshot while we talked. The Natalie who approached me on that sunny afternoon bore little physical resemblance to the entitled bride who had barred my children from her wedding. Gone was the perfect hair and designer clothing, replaced by a simple ponytail and casual attire. But the most striking difference was in her demeanor. The defensive aggression had given way to a quieter, more thoughtful presence. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she began, her voice lacking its usual dramatic flair. "I know you had every reason to refuse. I believe in second chances," I replied simply. "But I also believe in consequences and boundaries." Natalie nodded, glancing toward the playground where Lily was pushing Noah on a swing. "I've been working with my therapist on understanding why I've treated you and your children the way I have. It's not an excuse, but I've realized how much of my behavior stemmed from feeling replaced when my mom married your dad. I was so young, and suddenly there was this teenager who was better at everything, who had my mom's attention. I never wanted to replace you, Natalie," I said gently. "I was just trying to find my own place in a blended family." "I know that now," she acknowledged. "But for years I convinced myself you were the enemy. It was easier than dealing with my own insecurities." She paused, watching the children play. "What I did at the wedding was unforgivable. I understand if you can never truly trust me again. But I am sorry, genuinely sorry for the pain I caused." Her apology seemed authentic, free from the manipulation that had characterized our interactions for so long. I didn't offer immediate forgiveness, but I did express appreciation for her willingness to take responsibility. "Where do we go from here?" she asked finally. "Slowly," I answered honestly. "Any relationship with my children will require consistent effort over time and respect for my boundaries. They've been hurt, and I won't allow that to happen again." "I understand," she said quietly. "I'd like to try, if you'll let me." Over the following year, Natalie demonstrated gradual but significant change. She began with small, consistent gestures, appropriate birthday gifts for the children, respectful communication with me, genuine interest in their activities. She accepted without complaint when I insisted that her initial interactions with Lily and Noah be supervised and limited. Veronica's transformation was less dramatic but still meaningful. While she never became the warm, nurturing grandmother figure the children might have wished for, she learned to show respect and consideration. Our relationship remained somewhat formal, but the underlying hostility had dissipated. During this period of family reconstruction, My personal life flourished in unexpected ways. Sophie, the pediatric nurse I had met in Chicago, accepted a position at a hospital in our area, allowing our relationship to continue and deepen. Her patience with the complex family dynamics and genuine affection for my children made her an invaluable partner as we navigated the challenges of building a blended family on healthier terms. The children adored her, particularly Lily, who found in Sophie a female role model who combined strength and compassion in ways that helped heal some of the wounds left by losing her mother at such a young age. My professional relationship with Harold Richardson evolved into a genuine friendship and eventually a business partnership. His mentorship helped me expand my security consulting firm into new markets, creating a more stable and flexible career that allowed me to prioritize family time. As for Bradley, we maintained a cordial relationship from a distance. He eventually moved to Seattle for a fresh start, occasionally sending brief updates or holiday cards. I was genuinely happy when, 2 years after the wedding fiasco, he wrote to tell me he had met someone new, someone kind and authentic who valued family connections. On a warm Sunday afternoon, 3 years after the wedding that never happened, I hosted a backyard barbecue. Looking around at the gathered group, my father laughing with Harold over grill techniques, Sophie organizing a water balloon game with Lily, Noah, and some neighborhood children, Rachel and her new husband deep in conversation with friends from our volunteer group, and yes, even Natalie, now dating a veterinarian from the animal shelter and helping to serve drinks with a humility that still sometimes surprised me. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the painful journey that had led to this moment. Veronica had chosen not to attend this particular gathering, a decision that reflected her ongoing work to respect boundaries rather than force connections. It was one of many small indicators that real change was possible, even in the most entrenched family dynamics. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Sophie and I sat on the porch swing, enjoying the peaceful end to a pleasant day. "You've built something beautiful here," she observed, her hand comfortably entwined with mine. "Not many people could have transformed such hurt into something healing." "I had help," I acknowledged, thinking of all the people who had supported us through the difficult times: Marcus, Rachel, the Richardsons, and eventually Sophie herself. "Still," she insisted, "it took courage to set boundaries instead of just keeping the peace at all costs." Her words captured the most important lesson I had learned through this journey. True family is defined not by obligation or blood ties, but by respect, love, and the courage to require both. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to establish clear boundaries that allow authentic relationships to develop. The path to healing had not been quick or easy. It had required painful honesty, consistent effort, and the willingness to walk away when necessary. But the result was a life built on genuine connections rather than facades, on mutual respect rather than manipulation. As I looked toward the future, I felt hopeful not despite our past struggles but because of them. We had all grown stronger through facing hard truths and doing the uncomfortable work of change. My children were learning valuable lessons about self-worth and healthy relationships that would serve them throughout their lives. The wedding day betrayal that had seemed so devastating had ultimately been the catalyst for building something far more valuable than any carefully orchestrated celebration could have been: a family defined by authenticity rather than appearances, and relationships strong enough to weather both celebration and conflict. What family challenges have you faced that ultimately led to positive change? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the hardest moments in our lives lead to the most beautiful transformations. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.